business context is something specific to the business that I'm operating in. It could be information like where are my VPN head ends and what type of firewalls am I using and what devices mean what in terms of nomenclature. There's a lot of things you learn as an analyst being in a business that you pick up as institutional knowledge, things that you learn on the job that you learn through sort of osmosis. And I think business context, while it's a broad term, that's certainly key to it, which is what is specific to the business that you need to understand as an analyst to do your job. And what does an agent need to understand in order to draw meaningful conclusions, choose paths forward when it's doing investigations and things of that nature. But I think it's more than that as well. And the most basic form of business context is context about devices, about things like VPN head-ends that I mentioned, attributes inside of a fixed environment. But I think it also means context around things that you encounter like identities. It means history associated with both devices and things that are fixed assets and human beings. And it means that it must also be constantly current, rather than one of the complaints about CMDBs, which everybody who's ever deployed one has, is that they're outdated, that they're barely accurate, that sometimes they're completely misleading. Business context can't be that thing, or it leads to very poor judgment, both on behalf of analysts and of agents.
Thank you for that. And when you think about the way security operations centers work today and how security analysis is done, how is business context used or missed in those investigations?
Yeah, we'll start with missed. To a large degree, when a human analyst is doing work, their time in seat largely will define their ability to make appropriate judgments. I mean, they've absorbed business context over time. Often the environments they work inside of do have incomplete business context, like I mentioned, out of date CMDBs or whatever data sources they're relying on. So as they sit in the chair for longer periods of time, they learn more about how the business actually operates versus what the paper says. And they're able to make really intelligent judgments. The less time they have in that seat, the more questionable their judgment is on topics that are somewhat confusing or opaque. An agent is in a much different position if it's provided with business context that is in fact current and accurate. It can consume all of that data and make those judgments in real time. It's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other, but an agent does have the ability that it's a computer, so it can consume that data much faster.
Thank you. How do you break it down in terms of how business context can be put to good use in specific use cases? Can you share a couple of examples of where business context can make a difference in analysis?
Yeah. It's sort of a graduated tier and level of complexity in terms of how it gets applied. At a basic level, organizations are plagued with things like impossible travel alerts, for example. And often that's really easily solved with an analyst or an agent understanding where the VPN head ends are and what the expected VPN behavior or usage is inside of an environment. And then it's able to put those alerts or incidents to bed before necessarily even having to escalate them, or perhaps not even putting them in front of an analyst if an agent is handling them. And that's really important. But the other thing that it also helps to do is help set context for the types of investigations you're doing with certain types of alerts. So a suspicious login that's successful, that's meaningful. But if that user also happens to be somebody with global administration rights in Azure or AWS, that's much more concerning. And that's context. It's understanding the attributes, current realistic attributes of the thing that you're looking at and the scope they have inside your environment, so you can set the level of risk that's appropriate to that thing.
Thank you. Now I just want to switch gears to the latest features of Command Zero that we want to talk about and how Command Zero brings these capabilities to our customers. How does Command Zero make business context available to its users?
There's a few different approaches here in how we think about business context. One of which is we know that the organizations we operate with have things like asset databases or lists of things that are important to them that they can upload programmatically into the system and have the system consume them. And it allows them to set the context for those particular items. We also allow you to pull those lists and or data out of things like Teams. If you have information inside of your data repositories that you use on a daily basis that you want to insert into the system, you can extract them and embed them in the platform. But we also collect it in real time. So for example, when we do have identities, user principal names, Okta logins, et cetera, inside of the environment, we're able to extract what we know about those particular identities and allow that to be used in the context of an investigation. So again, if a user is a director of finance and in fact, an alert sees them rooting around inside GitHub, that's very suspicious. And it changes the context of the investigation that you're in. And there's a million different ways to cut that, but one of which is just to go back, it is to be able to upload data or import data from various different places that's important to you, but also to constantly be collecting it and making it available in investigations without it having been pre-loaded into the system.
Yep. Thank you for that. And when I think about business context in the context of LLM agents and how they operate security investigations, I think it's more about moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to customized assets where the agents have the context, both the historical context, the current alert context, and additional information about the environment, and make decisions accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want an agent to be able to reason meaningfully inside your environment, that context are the guideposts that allow them to navigate.
Thank you. We've been deploying this at our customer environments for quite a while now. Interesting insights that you've seen so far.
I think the amount of alert reduction is pretty meaningful for noise that you get from a variety of different product types, endpoints certainly, but also things like graph and enter related alerts and things from identity management systems like Okta. When you're able to provide the right business context, it allows you to put a lot of those seemingly difficult alerts to bed very quickly, perhaps not even put them in front of an analyst. Also, the feedback we've been given is that it's able to give agents the ability to navigate alerts more credibly, and come up with conclusions that are much more succinct, but also have the ability to surface data that might not have otherwise been there because it uses context to figure out where to look next in the scope of an investigation. So I think both from a dynamic perspective, agents being able to use that data directionally inside of an investigation is really, really powerful. And also the ability to winnow down, prioritize, or auto close out issues is very powerful as well.
And when you think about the next steps and the future for business context, what do you think are the areas of improvement and what are the expansion points for business context in the SOC?
Business context ultimately will be something that the agents are starting to draw on their own, even outside of having to rely on someone like uploading a CMDB or externalized data. I think that an agent will eventually start gathering context, maintaining it on its own terms, and be able to use that data fluidly inside of investigations. That's not months away, that's weeks away. This is the type of thing that I think is growing very fast. And I think it's extremely important, especially as you add new data sources that carry context to an organization. An agent needs to be able to have a conversation with them and figure out what context is important and automatically consume that.